They drove through my farm like it was their personal road every single day. Dust flew, crops snapped, and their loud laughter echoed across my land like an insult. I stood there helpless, fists clenched, heart burning. I tried talking. I tried warning. I even posted bold red signs that screamed private property. But the Karen sisters didn't care. "It's just a dumb field," one of them said, smirking like I was a joke. What they didn't know was this old farmer wasn't just some harmless man in overalls. I had a past. I had skills. And I had a plan. I didn't scream. I didn't chase. I stayed quiet and waited. Then I set a legal, clever trap, one they'd never forget. So when their shiny Lexus rolled through my soil one last time, it didn't just leave with dirt on its tires. It left in pieces. And that's when things really got interesting. My name's Jake, 51 years old, former military mechanic turned full-time farmer after my dad passed. I live on a quiet piece of land just outside town, surrounded by fields, trees, and peace. That peace shattered the day Karen and her sister Kelly moved into the fancy gated neighborhood. Across the fence, rich, loud, and arrogant, they acted like they owned everything. One morning, I noticed deep tire tracks slicing through my wheat. Thought maybe it was a delivery truck. But the next day, more tracks. Then I caught them in the act speeding across my crops in their shiny Lexus like my farm was a shortcut. I walked out to stop them. They waved and laughed. I told them to stop. They didn't care. "Call the cops, old man," Karen yelled. That's when I realized they wouldn't stop unless I made them. Not with words, not with warnings, but with something they'd never expect. I stood on my porch with a hot cup of coffee, watching the sun rise over the golden wheat field my father planted decades ago. It used to be the most peaceful part of my day, but that peace vanished when I saw the familiar silver Lexus slicing through my land again, just like it had the past few days. The tires tore straight through the rows, flattening crops, kicking up clouds of dirt like my hard work meant nothing. And inside the car, laughing like it was a joyride, were the Karen sisters, windows down, music blasting, both wearing oversized designer sunglasses and smug grins that made my blood boil. I raised my hand to wave, not out of politeness but warning. Karen looked right at me and waved back, slow and sarcastic, like she knew exactly what she was doing. Her sister Kelly threw her head back and laughed, pressing the gas harder, leaving a fresh path of destruction across the center of my field. That's when it hit me. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't ignorance. This was pure, calculated disrespect. My land wasn't just dirt to me. It was my family's legacy. My father taught me every inch of it. I'd spent years maintaining it with my own hands, and these two thought they could roll over it like it was some gravel alley behind a shopping mall. I didn't say anything that day. I just watched them disappear behind the trees, leaving behind bent stalks, broken fences, and a growing fire inside my chest. That night, I barely slept. I sat at my desk, replaying every second in my mind. I looked up the neighborhood they came from, and sure enough, it was one of those new luxury developments, strict HOA rules inside, but zero respect for what was around it. I printed a bright yellow private property sign and nailed it to a post, right at the edge of the field where they entered. I even added reflective tape so it would shine at night. The next morning, I woke up early, hopeful they'd seen the message and would finally stop. But I was wrong. At exactly 7:40 a.m., I heard that familiar hum of the Lexus engine. I rushed outside. There it was, same path, same damage, same smug faces behind the glass. The sign. They didn't even glance at it. They just drove faster, wheels digging deeper into the earth. I clenched my jaw so tight it hurt. This time, they weren't just crushing my wheat, they were crushing my pride. They were daring me to react. I tried reasoning. I caught them as they slowed down near the corner and stepped in front of the car. Karen rolled down the window, chewing gum like a teenager. "What now?" she said, clearly annoyed. I spoke calmly. "This is my land. You're not allowed to drive through it. You're damaging my crops, and it needs to stop." Kelly scoffed from the passenger seat. "It's just plants, old man. Get over it." Karen added, "You should be thanking us. We're adding character to your boring field." Then they drove off without another word. I stood there, hands shaking, staring at the fresh tire lines. They just burned into my soil. That was it. I'd had enough. That wasn't carelessness, that was cruelty. It wasn't just about saving time, it was about power. They knew I couldn't stop them, and that's exactly what they enjoyed most. But what they didn't know was I wasn't as helpless as they thought. I wasn't just some farmer in muddy boots. I used to build off-road defense kits for military vehicles. I knew how tires worked. I knew what could disable a car without breaking a single law. And most importantly, I knew patience. So I waited. I watched. I studied their pattern. They used the same route, same time, same entrance and exit point, like clockwork. And every time they laughed, they gave me more reason. They thought they'd won. But while they were mocking me, I was building something in silence. Something perfectly legal. Something that wouldn't hurt them, but would destroy what they valued more than anything. That shiny, precious Lexus they loved more than anyone around them. After that last encounter, I knew words wouldn't be enough, but I still tried. My father always taught me to handle things the right way first. So I printed new private property, no trespassing signs, bold red letters on whiteboards, nailed them into strong wooden posts, and placed them right where their Lexus rolled in every morning. I even added one in the center of the field, with neon tape that glowed when headlights hit it, just in case they missed it. I also fixed the broken fence by the creek, reinforced it with steel wiring, and added a locked chain where the natural opening was. For a few days, everything stayed quiet. No tire tracks, no noise. I thought maybe, just maybe, they got the message, but I was wrong again. It was a Wednesday morning when I heard the familiar hum of that engine. I looked outside and couldn't believe what I saw. Karen's Lexus wasn't just driving around, the sign it had run over it. The board was lying on its side, snapped in half. Muddy tire marks across the words, like they crushed my warning on purpose. The new fence, cut clean through with bolt cutters, the padlock missing. I was speechless. Who carries bolt cutters in a luxury car unless they're planning to destroy something? I grabbed my phone, snapped pictures, took videos, documented everything. Then I drove to their gated community and asked to speak with them. Not to fight, but to make them see reason. The security guard called ahead and asked them to come out. Karen stepped out in high heels and a fake smile, holding a coffee cup like I was interrupting her spa day. "We don't have anything to talk about," she said before I could open my mouth. I tried to keep calm. "Look, I'm just asking you to respect my land. This is a farm. It's not a shortcut. You're ruining my crops." Her smile vanished. "File a complaint if you want," she said coldly. "We'll keep driving." Then she turned and walked away, just like that, as if I was nothing, as if my land didn't matter, as if I didn't matter. I drove home in silence, rage boiling just under the surface. I sat on my porch, staring at the new damage, wondering how people could be so entitled, so cruel, so full of themselves. But I didn't break. I didn't yell. I didn't curse the skies. I stayed quiet, because quiet is powerful when you're planning something. That night, I installed motion sensors at the edge of the field and hooked them up to an old alert system I had stored in the barn. If they crossed the line again, I'd know instantly. I wasn't going to be caught off guard again. I also called the sheriff's office and filed an official complaint with all the evidence, photos, videos, timestamps, everything. The deputy I spoke to was polite but doubtful. "It's tough to enforce unless you catch them in the act," he said. "We'll try to send a patrol, but these things slip through." I thanked him anyway and hung up. I knew I couldn't rely on anyone else. This had become personal. My land, my life, my fight. And they had declared war with arrogance and rubber tires. The next morning, I found the padlock on my gate tossed into the ditch. The fence was wide open again, and right through the middle of my field, fresh, deep, messy tire tracks. They had done it again. But this time, they'd crossed a different kind of line. Not just property, not just disrespect, but legal territory. Because now, I had documented warnings, video proof, even a police report. And that gave me exactly what I needed. They thought they were untouchable. They thought I was weak. But they had no idea who I used to be before I became a farmer. They had no clue what I was capable of building in that barn. And most importantly, they didn't know they had already triggered the one thing I never take lightly: revenge with purpose. And I was just getting started. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. That day, standing over the fresh tire tracks cutting deep into my land, something in me shifted. I realized anger alone wouldn't fix this. Yelling wouldn't work. Confrontation had failed. So I did what they never expected. I got smart. I walked back into my house, dusted off my father's old filing cabinet, and pulled out the thick leather folder marked property rights. My dad used to say, "If you know the law better than the ones breaking it, you'll always win without raising your voice." I spent the entire evening buried in papers, highlighting key sections, taking notes like I was preparing for war. I searched county ordinances, agricultural protection laws, even state-level statutes. And that's when I found it buried under rural property defense and wildlife management, a clause that allowed non-lethal deterrence to protect farmland from damage caused by wild animals or unauthorized vehicles. The key word was non-lethal. No spikes, no violence, just engineered obstacles. Suddenly, a plan started forming in my mind, one bolt and wrench at a time. The next day, I visited the sheriff's office, calm and polite. I asked for Deputy Collins, a man I'd known for years. I explained everything, showed him the photos, the broken signs, the vandalized fence, the repeated trespassing, and my earlier complaint. He sighed, clearly frustrated too. "Jake, I hate to say it, but unless we catch them red-handed, it's tough to prosecute something like this. But what you're showing me, that's solid proof. You do have a case, especially with those signs up and the damage documented." I leaned in, lowering my voice. "What if I put up something that doesn't hurt them but stops the car legally?" He raised a brow. "You're talking about a farm deterrent?" I nodded. "Something harmless, but frustrating enough they never come back." He smirked. "Just make sure it's by the book, and don't tell me what it is." I didn't hear anything. That was all the green light I needed. I left the station with fire in my chest and a blueprint in my head. I drove straight to the hardware store, picked up steel rods, rubber mats, industrial-strength glue, and a dozen bags of loose gravel. Back at the barn, I laid out my tools, cleared my workbench, and got to building. What I was making wasn't a trap, and the violent sunset was more like a mechanical warning, something to remind them they weren't welcome here anymore. I created a false trail across the path they always took, made it look freshly driven. Underneath it, I buried a shallow grid of loosely arranged rods, covered by thick rubber sheets that looked like dirt from a distance. Over that, I scattered a layer of hay and a blend of paint to match the soil. From a distance, it looked natural, but once a heavy vehicle rolled over it, the rods would shift, the rubber would flex, and the tires would sink just enough to twist alignment and cause underbody strain. Not dangerous, not illegal, but expensive. The kind of damage that voids insurance, and more importantly, something that would only happen once. I tested it on an old trailer I had. The effect was perfect. Not a loud crash, not a violent jolt, just a slow, grinding realization that something had gone wrong, a sound that would chill any car owner. I set up to trail cameras in the trees, motion triggered, high resolution, angled perfectly. I even made sure the timestamp was visible in every frame. I wasn't just building revenge, I was building evidence. Because if they tried to blame me, I'd have every second of it recorded from entry to exit. As I stood back, wiping sweat from my brow, I looked at the trap I'd just installed, not with anger, but with satisfaction. This wasn't about payback anymore. It was about principle. They mocked my warnings. They broke my signs. They laughed at my face. Now, the ground beneath their tires would do the talking. And when they rolled through the next morning thinking they won again, they'd finally learn who they'd been messing with. The next morning, while the sun was still hiding behind the hills, I stood quietly in the middle of my field, staring at the path I had transformed into a trap. From the surface, it looked just like every other part of the farm: dry dirt, scattered hay, and tire marks that I had drawn by hand to make it seem used. But underneath, it was a different story. I had worked through the night to make sure every detail was perfect. The rods were spaced just right to cause uneven pressure under the wheels. The rubber mats were strong enough to hold up during the first few seconds, then flex and buckle with the weight of a moving car. Beneath them, I had embedded a fine mix of loose gravel and broken ceramic pieces harmless to the land. But brutal on tires, it wasn't dangerous, it wouldn't hurt a person. But a low-riding luxury car, it wouldn't survive. I made sure. There was no visible edge, no strange bump, no sign of anything unusual. It had to look natural. One mistake and Karen might slow down or swerve. But if she drove straight through like always, then everything would work exactly how I planned. I checked the hidden cameras one last time. Both were active, clear, and synced to my old tablet inside the barn. Every movement in that zone would be captured, timestamped, and saved directly to a hard drive I had backed up 3 ways. I wasn't just hoping for revenge, I was preparing my protection. If Karen or her sister screamed foul, I'd have everything. Their entry, the signs they ignored, the route they chose, the moment they hit the trap. No one could twist that. I didn't sleep that night. I laid on the couch with my boots still on, waiting, watching the live camera feed with a cup of cold coffee in my hand. Every sound outside made me sit up, expecting that familiar hum of the Lexus engine. But nothing. Just crickets, wind, and silence. The next morning came slow. I opened the barn doors and stood outside in the cold air, my breath fogging up at 7:41 a.m., just like every other morning. I heard it, that clean engine purr coming from the far side of the trees. I didn't move. I stood behind the barn wall, completely still, heart pounding like a drum inside my chest. The car came into view, silver paint glinting in the morning light, music playing through open windows. Karen was driving. Kelly was in the passenger seat, sunglasses on, phone in hand. They were laughing. Of course, they were. They always laughed. When they destroyed something that wasn't theirs, they crossed the first line of hay, wheels spinning slightly on the loose dirt, not a care in the world. The front tires hit the trap first silently, then a loud, low thud followed by the unmistakable sound of air rushing out. Karen's smile dropped instantly. I could see her eyes go wide. Through the windshield, the car tilted slightly as the back tires followed. And that's when the real damage began. A second crunch, then a sickening grinding sound from underneath as the rods pushed into the undercarriage. Sparks flew. Something metal dragged. The Lexus came to a slow, agonizing stop, smoke rising from the front hood. Kelly screamed something. Karen hit the wheel. Both doors flung open. Karen stormed out, screaming into her phone. Kelly looked like she was about to cry. They had no idea what had just happened. But I did. I watched it all unfold live on my tablet, zoomed in and recorded. Everything worked exactly as I designed. They didn't know it yet. But their car was done. Maybe not completely totaled, but damaged enough to cost thousands. And here's the best part, it all happened on my property. After ignoring multiple warnings, with legal protection already in place. No violence, no threats, just results. I walked back into my house, sat down, slowly, and took the first real breath in days. Because I knew one thing for sure, this was far from over. But for once, I was in control. Asterisk. I woke before the sun, heart racing, hands steady. Today wasn't just another morning, it was the day everything would change. I didn't grab breakfast, didn't check my phone. I walked straight to the barn, grabbed my old GoPro, mounted it on the tallest post near the trap zone, and aimed it perfectly. It was hidden behind a fake birdhouse. Impossible to spot unless someone knew exactly where to look. The camera was live, recording, and angled to catch the Lexus from the moment it entered until the moment it regretted doing so. I double-checked the trap. Nothing shifted overnight. The hay still looked natural. The paint on the soil was undisturbed, and the camouflage was holding strong. I made sure the trail cameras were powered and recording to both SD cards and my backup hard drive. There would be no doubt, no missing piece, no loophole they could exploit. I walked back to the house and poured myself a strong black coffee, sat on the porch, and stared across the field like a soldier waiting for the enemy to enter the battlefield. Time crawled. Every second felt like a minute. I didn't move. I barely blinked. Then I heard it, the soft purr of an engine in the distance. My eyes locked on the tree line. Through the early mist, I saw the familiar silver shape gliding toward the field. Same car, same route, same arrogance. Karen was driving. I could recognize her posture from here. Kelly sat beside her, probably texting or filming some useless video for their social media. They hadn't changed a thing. They still believed they were untouchable, that this land was just some empty shortcut for their convenience. They passed the first warning sign without a glance, rolled past the broken fence post like it didn't exist. I watched every second with a calmness I didn't expect. No anger, no panic, just the cold satisfaction of knowing what was about to happen. The front wheels touched the trap. At first, everything seemed fine. Then came the shift. The tires dipped slightly, just enough to change the car's balance. Karen's head jerked forward. She hit the brakes, too late. The rear wheels followed, landing right on the center of the false trail. There was a dull crunch, rubber twisting, metal groaning. The undercarriage dragged across the rods. The Lexus jolted to a sudden stop. A loud hiss filled the air as both front tires deflated instantly. Smoke curled up from underneath. Karen threw the door open and jumped out, heels sinking into the soft dirt, her expression shifting from confusion to rage in seconds. Kelly followed, stumbling, phone still in hand. They circled the car, yelling at each other, pointing at the tires, bending down to see the damage, but not understanding what had just happened. Karen kicked the side of the car and screamed something I couldn't hear. I sipped my coffee and smiled. This was the moment I had waited for. The Lexus was stuck, the alignment was wrecked, the tires were ruined, and the precious paint job scratched to death from below. They paced in circles, trying to figure out how this happened, but they never looked up, never saw the cameras, never imagined someone like me could outsmart them. Karen pulled out her phone and made a call, probably to her husband or a towing company. I didn't care. She could call anyone she wanted. The damage was done. And better yet, it was legal, documented, and undeniable. They had no idea that every second was being recorded from 2 angles, time-stamped and backed up, ready for any courtroom or police station they thought they could run to. I waited until the tow truck came, watched the driver struggle to hook the car without causing more damage, and then I quietly stepped back inside my house. I didn't need to confront them. I didn't need to say a word. My land had spoken for me, and for the first time in weeks, I felt peace again, not just because I'd stopped them, but because I'd done it smart, clean, and with absolute precision. They thought I was just a farmer. Today, they learned I was so much more. It happened faster than even I expected. 1 second, Karen's Lexus was cruising through the field like it owned the place, and the next, it dipped hard to the left. The front tire dropped into the trap, twisting unnaturally as the rubber collapsed inward. The car jolted with a sudden screech, and then came the sound I'd been waiting for, a loud, ugly bang that echoed across the field like thunder. Smoke erupted from the front end, a thick gray cloud rising into the morning air. The undercarriage scraped violently over the rods beneath, sparks flashing for a split second as metal met steel. Karen slammed the brakes, but it was already too late. The rear tires followed, bouncing hard and then deflating instantly as they rolled into the same trap. The whole vehicle shook, then lurched forward with a guttural groan before coming to a dead stop, its nose buried slightly in the soft dirt, completely disabled. Karen flung her door open and leapt out, nearly twisting her ankle in the process. "What did you do?" she screamed at Kelly, who stumbled out behind her, holding her phone in one hand and her purse in the other. Kelly looked panicked, eyes wide, hair a mess, trying to process what just happened. "Something's wrong with the tires. The car won't move," she shouted back, crouching next to the passenger side as smoke hissed from under the wheel well. Karen stomped toward the front of the Lexus, heels sinking into the dirt, mascara already starting to smear. She bent down, saw the shredded rubber hanging off the rim, and let out a furious yell. The damage was worse than I imagined. The tires weren't just flat, they were torn apart. The front bumper had cracks running across it. The grille was bent inward, and a long, nasty scratch stretched all the way down the passenger side. The rods I'd placed had ripped into the underbody like claws, and oil had begun to drip slowly onto the earth. I could see it all from my porch, clear as day. I didn't smile. I didn't move. I just watched, calm and still, sipping the last of my cold coffee as Karen completely lost control. She paced back and forth, yelling into her phone, kicking at the dirt, blaming everyone but herself. "Call someone, get a tow truck. This is insane," she shouted. "I told you to go around, Karen," Kelly yelled back, clearly scared now. "This is your fault." "No, it's his fault. That old creep did this." Karen spun toward my house like she was expecting me to be standing there with a shovel in hand. But I stayed behind the porch beam, silent, letting the moment unfold just the way I planned. The real beauty of it, they still didn't know what hit them. They thought it was just bad luck. Maybe some debris in the field, maybe an old fence, post. But in reality, every inch of that damage was designed, every scrape, every slash, every jolt planned down to the last bolt. I didn't need to confront them. I didn't need to argue. Because while Karen screamed and Kelly panicked, the hidden cameras were capturing everything. The trespassing, the signs they ignored, the exact moment they hit the trap, and every frame of their reaction. By the time the tow truck arrived, the Lexus looked like it had gone through a war zone. The driver shook his head and muttered something under his breath. "Man, what happened here?" Karen demanded answers, blaming the field, blaming unstable soil, blaming anything but the truth. But deep down, I think she knew. She knew this wasn't random. She knew this was the price of her arrogance. And the best part, there was nothing illegal about it. Nothing they could pin on me. The damage was done on my land because they broke the law first. Their $70,000 luxury car had turned into an expensive lesson, one they'd never forget. As the tow truck pulled away with the ruined Lexus chained to the back, Karen turned one last time toward my house, her face red with anger and embarrassment. But I didn't wave. I didn't gloat. I just watched her pride disappear down the road, busted, broken, and beaten by the very land she disrespected. Asterisk. The tow truck had barely turned the corner when I heard rapid footsteps crunching through the gravel. I looked up and saw Karen storming across my property like a thundercloud, fists clenched, face red, sunglasses thrown on top of her head. Her heels stabbed into the ground with every furious step, and her voice came before she even reached my porch. "You'll pay for this," she screamed, pointing a trembling finger straight at me. "You damaged my car. This is your fault." I stood up slowly, calm as ever, and didn't say a word. I just watched her throw her tantrum like a child who dropped her favorite toy. Kelly stayed behind near the road, arms crossed, head low, clearly not wanting to be part of the explosion. Karen reached the bottom step of my porch and looked up at me with a glare that could melt steel. "You set some kind of trap. That's illegal. You're going to be sued. I know people." I finally spoke, quiet but firm. "Actually, Karen," I said, pulling a flash drive from my jacket pocket, "you trespassed," repeatedly. After ignoring multiple posted warnings, I handed it to her, but she slapped it away. It landed softly on the porch. "I don't care about your games," she snapped. I bent down, picked it up, and placed it on the railing. Then I reached into my folder and pulled out something far more powerful than anger paperwork. "This," I said, opening it slowly, "is a signed complaint I filed 2 weeks ago with the county sheriff. S department includes photo evidence, video timestamps, and sworn statements regarding your illegal entry onto private farmland. This was filed before any of your car's damage ever happened." Karen's mouth opened, then closed. For the first time, she didn't have a comeback. Her eyes darted down to the papers. She took a step back. I kept going. The footage from this morning was already uploaded to cloud storage. The cameras were hidden, motion triggered, and time coded. I have your license plate, the time of entry, and the exact location of damage. You ignored the signs. You cut the lock. You drove across my crops, and you laughed while doing it. Her jaw trembled slightly, rage now mixed with fear. You tricked me." "No," I said, folding the paperwork neatly back into my folder. "I warned you. Multiple times. You chose not to listen. What happened to your car was a result of your own choices, and every bit of it, every inch was recorded and protected by law." Karen suddenly looked small. The fire in her eyes flickered, replaced by something more uncertain. She turned to look back at Kelly, who was now pretending to scroll through her phone. Avoiding eye contact completely. "I'm calling my lawyer," Karen said. but it didn't have the same venom as before. "You do that," I replied, stepping back toward my door, "and I'll forward everything to the sheriff's office again. Just in case you forget how this started." She didn't respond, just stood there, gripping her phone, cheeks flushed, jaw tight. "This isn't over," she muttered. "You're right," I said, holding the door halfway open, "because now it's official. The next step isn't mine, it's the law's." Then I walked inside and closed the door, leaving her standing alone on my porch. Humiliated and helpless, through the window, I saw her turn slowly, shoulders heavy, and walk back toward the road without another word. She didn't yell again. She didn't threaten, because she finally understood this time. She wasn't in control. I didn't have to scream or fight or raise a hand. All I did was protect what was mine, smartly and legally. And now, for the first time since they drove across my land, the Karen sisters were the ones running scared. And me, I was just getting started. After Karen stormed off my porch, I thought the hardest part was done. But the story didn't end there. A few days later, I got a call from Deputy Collins. His voice was low but full of satisfaction. "Jake, you won't believe this. Turns out, Karen isn't just causing trouble on your farm." I leaned forward, eager to hear more. "We checked public records after your complaint. There are past complaints from other neighbors trespassing, property damage, even noise violations. She's been skating by for a while." I wasn't surprised. The Karen sisters always acted like rules didn't apply to them. This was the final straw. Collins continued, "The sheriff's office has fined her heavily for trespassing and damaging your property. The fines are more than she bargained for." I smiled quietly. Justice was starting to catch up, but here's where it got better. Collins added, "Her insurance company refused to cover the damage to her Lexus." I blinked. "Why?" I asked. "Because the car was off-road, on private property. And the damage wasn't accidental, it was due to illegal trespassing. Karen's luxury insurance company had a clause denying claims if the car was used in unlawful ways, and driving recklessly across a private farm field qualified." I felt a surge of satisfaction. Not only was Karen paying out of her own pocket for the repairs, but she couldn't hide behind insurance to save her from the consequences. I thought about how she always acted untouchable, like money and power protected her. But even money couldn't save her now. The fines, the denied claims, the public record of complaints, it all painted a picture of someone who cared more about themselves than the people around them. I heard Karen tried to argue with the sheriff's office, but the evidence was overwhelming. The signs, the videos, my official complaint, and other neighbors' reports made it impossible to dismiss. This wasn't just about my farm anymore. It was about accountability. For once, the Karen sisters were facing real consequences. Word spread quickly in the small town. People who had stayed silent started talking. Some neighbors came up to me, thanking me for standing up to them. I realized my fight had become more than just about my land. It was about respect, fairness, and standing up to people who thought they were above the law. And the best part, I didn't have to do much after setting the trap. The law did the rest. Karen's reputation took a hit. Her expensive car sat in the shop for weeks. She had to pay thousands in fines and repairs with no help from insurance, and all because she refused to respect someone else's property. I sat on my porch one evening, looking over my wheat field, feeling proud. This land meant everything to me. It was my family's legacy and my life's work. And thanks to a little patience, knowledge, and a well-planned trap, I protected it. The Karen sisters learned their lesson the hard way, and I learned that sometimes the best revenge is letting the law do its job quietly, perfectly, and with a twist they never saw coming. After the whole mess with Karen and her ruined car, something amazing happened. Word spread faster than I expected. It started with a few neighbors, farmers who'd quietly watched the Karen sisters disrespect our land for years. One morning, as I was fixing the fence, old Mr. Benson, who runs the farm to fields down, walked over with a big smile and a warm pie in his hands. "Jake, you did what we all wanted but didn't have the guts to do," he said, patting my shoulder. That simple gesture meant more than words. Other farmers began stopping by too, offering help sharing stories about their own battles with the Hoa and Karen sisters. Suddenly, I wasn't alone. It felt like the whole community was behind me, tired of Karen's arrogance and ready to stand up for what's right. Even the local grocery store owner told me. He heard people talking about my stand against the sisters. "You're the man," he said with a grin. Meanwhile, the very group that backed Karen and Kelly started feeling the heat. After repeated complaints and mounting pressure, they finally called a community meeting. For the first time, the Hoa president announced a ban on all-through traffic on private farmland. No more shortcuts allowed. No more trespassing. The room was filled with nods and relieved faces. It was a victory for everyone who loved this quiet town and respected each other's property. But the best part, Karen's reputation took a nosedive. Instead of the fancy parties and high society events, she found herself whispered about in the local cafes and grocery lines. People didn't admire her anymore. They saw her as the selfish, reckless woman who ruined her own car and dragged trouble into our peaceful neighborhood. And that broken Lexus, it's still parked outside her house, gathering dust and rust. Nobody wants to buy it, and she can't afford the repairs. I pass by it sometimes, and I feel a quiet satisfaction. It's a reminder that pride and disrespect come with a price. As for me, I still wake up every morning and walk my fields knowing I protected what my family built with hard work and love. The farm is peaceful again, and so is my mind. The Karen sisters learned their lesson. The community came together, and justice was served not with fists, but with patience, law, and unity. And that's a victory worth more than any expensive car or empty threat. Asterisk. Weeks passed, and I thought things were settling down. The Karen sisters were quiet, their car still broken, and the farm peaceful again. But then word reached me that Kelly, the younger sister, had decided to fight back legally. She filed a lawsuit against me, claiming I had damaged her property intentionally and caused emotional distress. At first, I wasn't worried. I had the videos, the complaints, the sheriff's confirmation, everything to prove my case. But what happened next was something I couldn't have scripted better. When the court date came, I learned Kelly's lawyer accidentally included some of the very evidence that showed her trespassing on my property, the signed complaints, the timestamps, and those crystal clear videos I had carefully recorded. Instead of helping her case, the evidence completely destroyed it. The judge reviewed the files, then burst out laughing in the courtroom. "This is one of the clearest cases of trespassing I've ever seen," he said, shaking his head. "The complaint is dismissed." The courtroom filled with murmurs and chuckles. Kelly's face turned bright red, the humiliation clear. What made it worse was that all the neighbors who had seen her reckless driving were now openly talking about the lawsuit gone wrong. Instead of gaining sympathy, she had become a laughing stock. Karen and Kelly tried to keep their heads down after that, but the damage was done. No one wanted to cross me anymore. The sisters gave up on driving their cars through my fields. Now, if I saw them, it was walking head down, quiet, avoiding eye contact. The ultimate defeat for people who once believed they owned the town's shortcuts. Karma had hit twice. First, the car was destroyed on my farm. Second, their attempt to fight back ended in public embarrassment and legal defeat. As for me, I felt a deep sense of justice, not just for myself, but for everyone who respected hard work and honesty. Sometimes it's not about fighting loud or fast. It's about being patient, smart, and letting the truth come out exactly as it should. The Karen sisters learned that the hard way, and my farm, it's safer, quieter, and respected. And that's all I ever wanted.